Ah, ahoy! 2 years in a row and Lara Croft is ruining Valentine's Day plans. But you see, last year for Tomb Raider 1, 2, 3 Remastered, I was tweaking to play it as soon as I can. This year, however, I didn't care as much. Just played it whenever I had a moment during a very chaotic week. And the reason for that is because Tomb Raider 4, 5, 6 was kinda like the series going through puberty. All the weird changes going on, weird new mechanics I didn't know what to do with, tufts of hair in odd places, and a rebellious emo phase we all look back at and cringe.
So during the production of The Last Revelation, the series' developers at Core Design were exhausted with making Tomb Raider games. They were pumping these things out yearly and they just wanted to stop doing that. They wanted to do something else, anything else. But they were aware that companies want to capitalize on what's hot, and as long as the series was successful, they were going to be forced to keep making Tomb Raider games until they died and maybe even afterward. So during the production of The Last Revelation, the developers hatched a secret plan. They quietly snuck in an ending where Lara Croft dies, and by the time the CEO found out about the little rascal's scheme, it was already too late to change anything. So The Last Revelation release was absolutely loved by fans who were also heartbroken by the ending, and Core Design was finally done making Tomb Raider games. So that's why the following year, in 2000, we got Tomb Raider Chronicles. Yeah, the CEO went, "Pfft, you guys think you're done making Tomb Raider games? Think again." How did they get out of the whole "she's dead" thing? Oh, well, the story of Chronicles is that after Lara's funeral, 3 of her closest allies gather and swap stories of her adventures. And that's what Chronicles is. It's 4 memories of different little mini-adventures Lara had, and at the very end of the game, there's a cutscene revealing that Lara is still alive. Oh, that must have been an awful day at the office. The developers hated making this game. The staff in interviews admitted they were just making it for a paycheck and there was absolutely no passion for it. Hell, the most fun anyone had working on it was apparently the lead animator who enjoyed making new death animations for Lara. All this behind the scenes stuff is very reflective in the actual game, but more on that later. Chronicles received mixed reviews and was a low point for the series, but that pales in comparison to what came next. Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness, I like to compare it to a car crash. It's terrible, yet compelling. The game had a horrid development and was rushed beyond belief. It ended up being a buggy mess with abysmal controls, and it had so much content cut both intentionally and accidentally. Angel of Darkness was supposed to be a big new direction for the series, taking it to the next gen, but instead it was so bad that it killed the studio and almost killed the franchise.
So it's odd that this entire tough time period for the series is getting fully highlighted. See, The Last Revelation I always figured was gonna get brought forward as a form of DLC or something, or maybe as a bonus incentive for a physical release so that people who own it digitally will buy it again. Which, speaking of, side note, Tomb Raider 1, 2, 3 Remastered eventually got a physical release. Yeah, on Switch, on PlayStation, but not on Xbox. But anyway, I always figured The Last Revelation was gonna get remastered, maybe even Chronicles. But Angel of Darkness? That's fascinating. So let's check it out. But unlike how I talked about the last Remastered trilogy where I just talked about it as a package, I am going to talk about this as a package, and I'll also give each game in this package some attention too.
So first things first, to select our game instead of going up or down, we now go left and right to select which side we want to play. Switching things up, eh? Aw, you naughty Remastered trilogy, you. So when it comes to the changes, you kinda have to split off Last Revelation and Chronicles from Angel of Darkness, as the degree of the remastering aspect differs between the two. Now the 3 things I highlighted with the previous trilogy were the graphics, controls, and features. With graphics, once again, they get upscaled to look cleaner, and we have numerous additions to the environment like extra terrain, character models are smoothed out, and also major lighting effects. With The Last Revelation, it was especially noticeable how incredible the upscaling is. By itself, Last Rev was already a great looking title, and I was shocked by how drastically better everything looked here. The biggest highlight, not only from The Last Rev, but also the whole package, was the train level. This is how it originally looked, and this is the remaster. Oh my gosh, it's truly beautiful! Also, once again, we can freely toggle new visuals in Classic with just the press of a button. I love it, it's my favorite part of these remasters. Chronicles didn't have as many noticeable ticks in visuals, but for all I know, that can all just be coming in a future update. I remember complaining in the previous Tomb Raider Remaster video about how many levels didn't get drastically changed too much outside of upscale textures, and then an update added a whole bunch of terrain after the fact. With controls, once again, we have an option for Classic Tank or Modern controls. I stick to Tank because I'm so used to how Lara moves, and Modern controls feels wrong to me. When it comes to the new features, we once again have a camera mode that lets us explore the environment, boss health bar, a whole ton of trophies / achievements for us to hunt, a new game plus mode we get after beating the game that lets us play a harder version of it, and while these games didn't have any expansion packs, Last Rev does include the standalone bonus level that we can play, The Times, which is great. It was a PC exclusive, so it gives us console players an opportunity to finally try it out. In the end, it's safe to say with these games, you're pretty much getting the same deal as the last Remastered trilogy.
So let's actually talk about the two games.
Let's first do Last Revelation, naturally. So the Last Rev was supposed to be the last one in the hearts of core designers, so they went all out. They put a lot of effort into the environments, the levels, the gameplay, the graphics, the enemy AI, the story, all in hopes to give Lara Croft a proper send-off. All that really shines through here. But if I'm gonna be honest, it was always my least liked classic Tomb Raider title. Which I know sounds like blasphemy, but this isn't a dislike. I enjoyed my time with Last Rev, but I'm not too keen to replay it. It's like a date where you both had a nice time, but things aren't clicking enough to pursue things further.
Does that make sense? I don't know, I haven't been on a date in a while.
This disconnect actually has a few reasons. So unlike past Tomb Raider titles where they had us jump around different locations, Last Rev takes place entirely inside of an Egyptian setting. Which doesn't mean knocking the Egyptian setting, again, Last Rev looks incredible, and all the locales are beautiful. But I like the variety that previous Tomb Raider games used to throw. I like jumping from Peru to Greece to Egypt to China to Venice to Nepal to India to London to Nevada to Russia to Scotland. The change in scenery throughout the games help keep things fresh. With Last Rev, the one setting wore thin with me. I just recently got to escape the deserts of One Piece Odyssey. I'm good on sand. Also, ew, icky bugs. Now, Last Revelation is also a challenge of a game to beat. While a lot of the puzzles are creative and fun, there were also a lot of them that are so convoluted under the definition of
how the hell was I supposed to see that?
Alternatively,
how the hell was I supposed to know that?
A lot of the time, the solution to a puzzle is something you didn't even think you could interact with. Now, in Tomb Raider's DNA from the very beginning, it was always a bundle of levels that threw you into large areas with numerous doors, keys, switches, and gizmos, and your job was trying to figure out what the hell is step 1. Well, when Last Rev throws you into these gigantic levels, it multiplies that problem by like 4! Throughout the adventure, we sometimes have interconnected levels where we can jump back and forth between them, which sounds cool and makes us all feel like a real connected world, but an issue arises where you need an item to progress, yet you won't know where that item is, whether it's in one large level or another. Way too often in the game, I think I'm onto something and found a way to progress and ended up just getting the sound effect for finding a secret, and that just bums me out. You heard correct, I find a secret, which is a good thing, and I'm upset. Now the counter argument to that is that it makes it so that when you do figure everything out, it makes the dopamine rush even better. And yes, with classic Tomb Raider games, it's a great feeling once everything starts falling into place and it's a water slide to the end. But I don't get that often from Last Rev. Way too frequently, I'm finding myself referring to Stella for solutions on what the hell I have to do, and that doesn't make beating the game feel as great as it should. I just wish Last Rev did a better job at explaining things. At the start, we are forced to do this training level for 30 minutes where it'll go over and teach you how to play. It's a drag to get through because the game goes over basic shit like jumping and climbing, something we've already been doing for years now, but it fails to take the opportunity to teach you all the new things you can do, like shooting certain objects to reveal items, combine items in your inventory, opening doors without needing switches or keys. That would have been nice to know.
But again, that's all just a me thing. End of the day, I can still admit that The Last Revelation is a great title and takes some of the best elements from past Tomb Raider games and excels at them.
When it leaves you in a tomb to solve puzzles like you're playing Tomb Raider 1, it's some of the best tomb exploration in the series. When we got some action sequences that later titles such as TR2 incorporated, it was sensational, like when we got to do a car chase or, the train level. Tomb Raider 3 was hard as f***, and this game is no picnic either. Tomb Raider Revolution not only draws from the best aspects from the past, but also, I'd argue that it was way ahead of its time with its storytelling.
Overall, great adventure game, just not my cup of tea. I can play it, just not as often as other TR titles. Please don't hate me.
So let's jump to Chronicles. So real quick, a common complaint some people had about Tomb Raider 2 and 3 was how the game was taking you out of ancient caverns and putting you into modern settings. And also that the games were getting a bit too actiony and Tomb Raider had lost its identity a bit. If you told me that, I'd nod my head. Now, if you told me that Chronicles lost Tomb Raider's identity with modern settings, barely any tombs, and being way too actiony, then I'd nod my head a little bit faster. So once again, Chronicles is a series of 4 different adventures, all with distinct vibes to them. The first has us in the streets of Rome, looking for keys to open an ancient door, and this felt like standard Tomb Raider levels. Let's move on. The next section had us break into a Russian base so that we can break into a Russian submarine so that we can break into the ocean, which leads to the ocean breaking into the submarine. This section leaned a little more towards action as it was heavier on the story beats and dramatic flair. We then go to Ireland, where we play as a teenage Lara who is trying to navigate an island that's being haunted by demonic forces. These levels had us without weapons or any other means to defend ourselves, so it was a puzzle-heavy section that had us do our best to avoid the scary messed-up creatures. And lastly, we had this Mission Impossible-style infiltration of an HQ building in New York, and these levels heavily emphasized on being not Tomb Raider. It was just so weird. We had moments where we had to stealthily sneak around guards and knock them out with chemicals, and it just felt like the series was totally lost.
But at least it's all different locales. I know that argument was stupid.
Remember, this is a game that the developers did not give a shit about. They just threw this thing together and it does feel like it. They reused a lot of assets, and it's especially noticeable in the Rome levels where the two villains we are dealing with are Larson and Pierre from Tomb Raider 1. And while the remastered made things look right, the original graphics look so odd because you had Lara that evolved graphically over the years standing next to the exact same models of Larson and Pierre from Tomb Raider 1, and you can just see how unnatural it looks. But besides the graphics, the levels have absolutely no depth to them. Besides the deep sea dive. They are so shallow, very point A to point B, and you can tell there is no life to them.
Now, if you thought my opinion was terrible after what I said about The Last Revelation, then get a hold of this. I like Tomb Raider Chronicles.
Trust me, if I can exchange these opinions for better ones, I would. The reason I like Tomb Raider Chronicles is because it's very easy compared to other titles. It's a game I can play laid back without needing to put too much thought in, which is nice from time to time. And also, to give it credit, it does have some highlights like Larson and Pierre being a comedic duo, the singing submarine level is actually cool and has some creative moments, the atmosphere of the Ireland levels are effectively creepy and freaked me out as a kid, and the boss battles are pretty solid too. A lot of the bad press from Chronicles has to do with how it's such a bare-bones basic game that feels like stale Tomb Raider content, and the fact that it was all that following up The Last Revelation, which felt like the series was finally starting to evolve. I get the negativity. I always managed to get enjoyment out of it growing up, and even now, I did agree it felt like a throwaway title, but I still found it inoffensive, like a sneeze. Core Design just did it and moved on. And I want to give Core credit for their talent. Even though this was a game they hated making and wanted no part of, they still pumped out a solid title that can be enjoyed. It was always part of my rotation of Tomb Raider games back in the day, and I'm happy that it is again now too.
I don't think Chronicles did anything too wrong. It's not like they almost had teenage Lara have a nip slip. So with Tomb Raider The Last Revelation and Tomb Raider Chronicles, everyone kinda knew what to expect. With this remastered trilogy, all the question marks were pointed towards Angel of Darkness. How is it gonna be updated graphically? Are they gonna make any changes? And if they do, what will the changes be? Of all the games in this trilogy, Angel of Darkness was the one I was most curious about, and oddly, the one I was most eager to play.
When I started playing this remaster, as I was working my way through Last Rev and Chronicles, I didn't let myself enjoy them as much because Angel of Darkness was consistently on my mind.
So let's not delay it any further.
So yes, while a lot of people can agree that Angel of Darkness is the series' low point, it doesn't often get called one of the worst video games of all time, because if we are being totally honest, while the game was still straying away from what made Tomb Raider, it did still have a lot of intriguing elements. For one, the game's plot is actually really solid and was heading in an interesting direction. The premise is that Lara ends up getting framed for the murder of her former mentor Werner von Croy, which by itself is odd. Really? The police are hell-bent on finding her for this? Over the years, Lara has killed a lot of people, and even in this game, yet nope, for plot reasons she's on the run from French pigs for this murder. It's one of those video game logic moments. But anyway, so Lara is now trying to clear her name and uncover the true killer of Von Croy while also searching for an artifact that connects Von Croy to a secret society that wants to reawaken an ancient alien thing. Along the way, we come across Curtis, who's part of another secret society that's fighting the first secret society, and we actually get to play as Curtis for a few levels to progress the plot. Also, there's totally an underlying will they won't they thing going on here. It has a lot of moving parts and memorable side characters, and I can't say it wasn't captivating at times seeing the story unfold. Besides that, Angel of Darkness is also beautifully scored. It's so atmospheric, and the music the game has is entrancing. From subtle background music to straight up club music, it's all really good. And during high action cinematics, the OST is doing a great job complementing what's on screen. The locales are also pretty solid though, I'd say that with a grain of salt. Remember how Tomb Raider games lately feel like they lost their identity because the game just became less and less Tomb Raiding? Well, yeah, Angel of Darkness is continuing that downward trend. Most of the settings are modern and industrial, like the streets of Paris, a nightclub, a museum, a sanatorium, an apartment building, a biolab. Hilariously, those are some of the more interesting places to be, while the very few actual tombs or archaeological sites we got to explore were the least interesting levels. Except for the Four Seasons, but I'm biased because I like anything that has us take on challenges regarding the four elements.
So Angel of Darkness has good things about it. But now the bad.
Oh my gosh, the controls are abhorrent! The game feels so stiff, and moving Lara feels so clunky and disconnected. It doesn't feel like when you press a button you're controlling her. Instead, when you press a button, it's more like you're asking her to do something, and maybe she'll feel like doing it, but she's still upset with you about something. Hey, Lara, please climb upward. No, just jump to your death. Why not? Any form of platforming is also so slow, rigid, and weighed down. However, her jumping is still similar to past games, which makes things so unsynchronized. Lara controls like a construction crane, but then I get whiplash whenever I try to execute a precise jump and end up overshooting it. Even gunplay, it feels so awkward and iffy. I felt like the camera was gonna turn upside down any second. Now, the developers want to add some kind of leveling up system where we get to upgrade Lara's strength and stamina, and it is so unnecessary and stupid. For one, stamina meters are the worst things games can do, and I hate them. And secondly, I've watched Lara climb for long stretches, and now telling me that she gets tired after climbing for a few seconds is beyond stupid. And the strength, oh god, it's dumb. Especially when Lara starts telling me she's not strong enough to open a door. It's a door! On top of all that, the game is a buggy mess. Towards the end, it feels so rushed, and it has a lot of content missing, and it's apparent because you'll often be asking yourself what the point of some things were. And you can only assume it's because there was supposed to be more to it.
So while Angel of Darkness had things going for it, end of the day, if a game is unplayable, then it doesn't matter how good the story or music is. But despite all that, I always had a soft spot for it. I always thought it was an interesting title that could have been great had it actually been finished. Don't get me wrong, I'm not calling it a great Tomb Raider game. When I played it, it was because I wanted to play Angel of Darkness. If I was feeling some good old Tomb Raider gameplay, I wouldn't even look in this thing's direction. But anyway, let's see what the remaster did.
So first, visually, there's not much different. I often found myself flickering the graphics button to see if anything was new. The environments are pretty much the same thing. Really, only difference graphically are the character models. While Lara isn't drastically all that different, the other character models are. They finally gave Curtis fingernails. Though not all the models got touched, I find it funny that they gave this hooker on the straight cleavage but couldn't fix Gunnarson's eyebrows. Goodness, they're so blurry, he needs microblading. The only other graphical change was that the level load screens got a facelift, but that's about it. Now with Angel of Darkness, I once again gave modern controls a go, and I gotta say, it is a general improvement. While platforming is still dense, Lara's general running feels so much more natural, especially when you try to change her direction. In tank controls, having her switch what direction she's running is like trying to pull off a 3-point turn. This is the first instance for me where modern controls were for the win. And lastly, the new features. So Angel of Darkness had a good number of content that got put back into the game. During the Paris ghetto levels, we had some shops we were able to visit, but there was no point to them. You couldn't buy anything. Well, now you can actually buy things, which makes a lot of the early game tasks of collecting valuable items to sell actually have a purpose. We also got some extra lines of dialogue, new items, and the biggest gameplay addition is that when we play as Curtis, we can now actually use that cool spinning blade thing. I'm all for it! Plus, it makes him move like Serena Williams. All these are welcome additions and help give a lot of things in Angel of Darkness purpose. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't fix a lot of the glaring issues it had, and you are still playing the same game from 2003, but it's still something worth checking out.
And that's all I have to say about this remastered trilogy. It's a fascinating package, and while I'm not as overjoyed as I was when the first trilogy came out, this one, I'm still happy about it existing. It's not as much of a steal deal as the first remastered trilogy. That one had all 3 games and their expansion packs. But 4, 5, 6 is still a worthy purchase, because The Last Revelation might just be the best upscaling not only in this package, but the whole series, and is just a great title in general. Chronicles is a playable, easy time, and Angel of Darkness, while it is still in rough shape and the new additions didn't necessarily solve the game's most glaring problems, but it is still a captivating playthrough. It's not a redemption arc by any means. It's more like a history lesson. I'm really glad they brought all 3 games over. It's a great package with 3 games that are very distinct from one another. Plus, I'm glad I now have this version of Angel of Darkness. I did have it on PlayStation 2, but this version took the term darkness way too literally. You know, now that I think about it, I was actually gonna do an old look on this game back in 2022. I don't know why I didn't end up doing it, but I do remember the intro I wanted to do. Okay guys, today I'm going to be live streaming me speedrunning Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness on the PlayStation 2. So without delaying any further, let's give it a go! Well, this part's not so bad.